we're now getting into the thick of it. We're now getting into the dense forest of laws and details and ritual proscriptions. We're this week, Parshat Tetzaveh, looking at the kind of regal uniform of the high priest. Lots of time spent detailing exactly what he looked like, what his dress looked like. Let's put a picture of it on screen just quickly. And I didn't find a good one, but this is the one that came up when I was Googling just before class. So there's like, you just get a sense of just what this is sort of turban. It's literally like a turban with a tiara and an insignia on it. And there's a long robe. We're not seeing most of it here, but what we are seeing here are these stones on his chest, and that's called the choshen, the breastplate. And we're going to be talking about that today, or at least one piece of it. I'm interested in, even though I said last week, and I regretted as the words came out of my mouth, that these passages can seem a little bit boring, and because I hate to say that or in any Torah study, but it's hard reading. But I actually find this mode of study to be, and I think our tradition has too. There's lots of vivid, detailed work with these descriptions of the tabernacle and of the priestly rituals by the Midrash and subsequent commentators who saw great meaning and symbolism in it. And I think it's because they appear to us as a kind of code that requires deciphering. This is like, why are we getting all these details? It must be that there's something about this structure that we're supposed to understand. It must be that it's conveying more than just details, but some message, okay? And I actually think reading the Torah in that way, it teaches us to read quietly and closely and carefully. And that's decoding, deciphering is, I think, one great mode of reading and of studying our Torah. And I say all of this because today we are going to look at, I said, one item in the priestly garments, and it is the choshen, or more precisely, it is embedded within the choshen, and that is the Urim v'Tumim. The Urim v'Tumim. All right, so we'll spend our time explaining what that is, and I promise you a rather strange and, at least so far for me, not an entirely satisfying journey. Okay, so let's say a blessing and let's get started. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thanking God for the chance to fiddle with codes and maybe unlock secrets. Okay, so here is the source sheet we're going to be looking at today. Okay, and let's just bring ourselves into what we're not going to even read all the text that we have in front of us today, but this is just an excerpt from a long passage describing every little stitch of the high priest's garments, and then you get to this really interesting object. It's both an interesting object and it's interestingly named, and that is the Choshen Mishpat. So this is, I'm going to translate it for now as the breastplate of judgment. The breastplate of judgment. Because mishpat, the word mishpat, is often translated as justice or judgment or law. But I must say, I often use the choshen to suggest a different meaning to the word mishpat that I actually want us to bring back to our thinking about justice, which is that mishpat also means a kind of an order, an orderly layout. So a well-ordered society, or a well laid out, some scheme, some vision, some pattern, and the stones here are laid out in a pattern, in a scheme, in a set of rows, and because of that, maybe that's why it's called Chosh Mishpat. But today, it seems clear to me that the other connotation is also relevant, that it's the breastplate of judgment, and that'll be relevant to what we'll soon see, the Urim V'Tumim. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I do want to just give you some sense of how those stones looked, because we're going to have to think about them today. And that is this. Where do I want to start? There's some discussion of how you stitch them in, with what yarn. It's square. And here, okay. Set in mounted stones in 4 rows of stones. Arba Turim. That's the name. A lot of famous books take their names from some of these descriptions. So the Arba Turim is a famous book of law. The four rows, or the 4 columns. The first row shall be a row of carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald. The first row shall be the second row, a turquoise, a sapphire, and an amethyst. The third row, a jacinth, an agate, and a crystal. The fourth row, a beryl, a lapis lazuli, and a jasper. These are strange names for stones, and some of them are just like the best guess for what the Hebrew is in there. Not so important for our purposes, except to note that the idea is that the priest wore a breastplate of 12 stones to represent the 12 tribes, and each one had a different kind of, tribal insignia, and so a tribal stone. Okay, so now that's interesting enough. I actually think maybe one of these years I taught a class just on the Choshen Mishpat and the meaning of the word Mishpat, and is justice associated with all of this. But here again, I want to translate it as judgment, particularly because the object we're about to look at, which is in itself a kind of decoding object, is the Urim V'Tumim. And the whole problem and the whole question and our whole work today will be an attempt to answer the question, what were the Urim V'Tumim? What were the Urim V'Tumim? Because I want to claim strongly at the outset that my sense is that nobody knows. And I'm going to present you with a bunch of different theories. And at certain points along the way, I'm going to pause for your consideration and your reflection and your interpretation. I'll do that soon. But I want to take a look at some of the classic theories. And, there's something that all these interpretations are seeing in common, but I don't know. I woke up this morning with a headache. I really did. I woke up this morning because I went to bed thinking about the Urim V'Tumim. And I don't think that I decided I'm finally going to teach a class about it this year. I want to teach a class about it every single year, but I can't, because I don't know what they are. I haven't ever figured it out. And I think, well, first of all, I have to maybe teach and hear from you to figure out what they are. But actually, I have a strong sense that none of us ever will. But let's try. Okay. So here we go. So I just showed you the text of the breastplate of judgment, and there are all those stones. And then I'm just going to scroll down a little bit because it tells you how to attach it and how to fasten it. And there's rings of gold and cords of blue, and it's just like it's that kind of detail all the way through. But then there's a repeating at the end of what this thing is. It's a thing that Aaron shall carry the names of the sons of Israel on the breastplate of judgment over his heart. V'nasa Aaron et shmot b'nei Yisrael b'choshen hamishpat al libo. Choshen hamishpat. Okay, b'vo el hakodesh lezikaron lifnei Hashem tamid. When he comes into the holy of holies, the sanctuary, for remembrance before the eternal at all times. For remembrance for the eternal at all times. And then here we are. Okay, this is what I've been building up to. Here we arrive. V'natata el choshen hamishpat et ha'urim ve'et ha'tumim. And inside the breastplate of judgment, you shall place the Urim and Tumim. And I want to just say that in itself is a decision of translation. And we might translate it as something like, and put on the breastplate the Urim, the Tumim. In other words, is it inside? Is it upon? Where exactly? Where does it go, or what's going on here? I think we don't really know. Okay, so I just want to give you some options, some possibilities here, because we're going to try and figure this out. But let's just run with the translation they gave us. Inside the breastplate of judgment, you shall place the Urim v'Tumim. What are they? So that they are over Aaron's heart when he comes before the Eternal. And thus Aaron shall carry v'nasa Aaron et mishpat b'nei Yisrael al libo, and thus Aaron shall carry the judgment for the Israelites over his heart before the Eternal at all times. Okay. What? Seemed like massive things were happening. Aaron was going to carry the judgment of all the tribes of the children of Israel on his heart. In the Choshen Mishpat, the 12 jeweled breastplate, fine, the symbolism there I sort of get, although why it's associated with judgment. But now the Urim v'Tumim are the way that Aaron is going to carry the judgment of Israel on his heart. Someone is unmuted. I keep hearing a little sound in the background, so check your mutes, please. Okay. What do you see here? This is not, I don't have good questions, because this is a more of a try to a sort of gaze and wonder kind of journey we're on. But the Urim v'Tumim, I don't want just wild speculation, but I want, do you have, I should just say, and then I'll open it up for interpretations. These are famous. The Urim v'Tumim are famous. And there have been wild speculations all throughout history on what these are. Famous enough that some of you may know. Anyone go to Yale here? Is some of you may know that Yale's coat of arms, it has on it. Here, I'll share it. This is Yale's coat of arms. Urim v'Tumim. Urim v'Tumim. Okay, that's like, it's one of the best universities there in the world, and what they thought to put on their coat of arms was Urim v'Tumim, which they then translate into Latin as light and truth, lux et veritas. Okay, so we'll figure out whether we think that's a good translation or not. But the Urim v'Tumim are on Yale's coat of arms. What? Okay, so what do you see here in the text? What do you think is going on here? And I see some of my ringers who are going to give us some juicy materials. Let's start with Ariella.
To me, what it immediately brought up was the v'ahavta, putting on our heart.
Yeah. Okay, good. Right. There's something, that's an interesting comparison here, because think about the idea that you wear something symbolic, and it's a sign of something. And the Ve'ahavta, the prayer that we say, the Shema prayer that we say, the Ve'ahavta part has in it that you wear it as a sign upon your hand and between your eyes. And so that we take to refer to the prayer boxes, the tefillin that we actually wear on our arms and between our eyes. And I was just reading the Malbim last night, who says that the tiara of the priest is kind of like tefillin, and that's we engage in similar practices ourselves, and the practice is using an object and the words on an object in order to display something before God, or in order to connect our psyche to something, right? So that it is, in the best, deepest sense of the word, a kind of psychological move, right? Like in a symbolic communication. Okay, good. But that's just okay. But what is it? So Richard Snoopy Fogel here. How you doing, Richard?
That would be me, yes. Real quick, I've always assumed that the Urim and Thummim were two little stones that were secreted in a pouch inside the breastplate, and supposedly later on, leaders of Israel could take them out and ask God a yes or no question.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to bring up one other side comment.
I'm gonna let you do that.
This.
I'm gonna let you do that. But let me just, because you did what you I'm so grateful you usually do. You gave us some of the juicy pieces of information. So, okay, we're starting at theories. Maybe they are also stones, and they're two stones maybe, and they're used to answer questions. So that's, okay, that's a first pass. The Urim and Thummim, yes, are often remembered as magic stones, so to speak, that you could, and that's why the class is called, and they are often referred to as oracle stones. But it's like, there's something about them being two that leads to theories that, well, but they were oracles, but it's not like they would tell you anything. It's that they could say yes or no. Okay, all right. But Richard, please continue. Oh, now we can't hear you. Sorry. My interruption caused a mute.
It turns out I was researching this with a study partner, and we wanted to find out what happened to the Urim and Thummim. And according to the Latter-day Saints, they were given to Joseph Smith to help him translate the golden plates.
Well, that's good. It's good to know what finally happened to those those bad boys. All right. Thanks for that information. Okay. All right. With that new information in our quill, Noah, please.
Yeah, I always thought they might be stones. They might be something else that just kept that divine light near to the heart of the high priest, and something physical that kept the priest or the leaders grounded so that they could make these judgments and rulings, knowing that they are answering to a higher power while still being grounded in this physical reality.
Good. Okay, good. So Noah is describing one of the features of these rocks, which is that they could illuminate and give some light. And Noah is picking up on, and it's there. It's like this is also becomes a major touch point for traditional interpretations. Noah's picking up on the fact that Urim, now we have to start thinking about the words, right? Soon, and we will, as soon as we look at Rashi, we'll see. We have to think, what are Urim and what are Thummim? Do we know? Not exactly. But Urim sounds like it could be related to light, or. So Urim, lights. So they were the lights and somethings. We'll talk about that more, but yeah. And therefore, they are, because they're designated by God and they can refract and reflect light, they'll sparkle and illuminate some divine message. And it is God's message, not like the stones have power, but they kind of are there to transmit some divine message. Brother Payam, I was just thinking about you. This morning. I was like, I haven't seen Payam in too long. How you doing?
Good. I had a question. Are sons of Israel Nadab and Abihu?
Sons of Israel, Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu are Aaron's sons.
Right.
And they are being appointed this week as priests, not high priests. Aaron's the high priest, and they're the ones that will eventually die.
This is before that. Sorry, I got
before that. Yeah.
Okay, because I just saw, because it's the duality, and he keeps it near his heart, and what eventually happens to them. To me, there's just some kind of connection between what happens to them and he keeping it in his heart. It's almost like a Chekhov, like, whatever.
That's interesting. Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. We're not there yet, so we'll hold on that. Okay. Let me. I see. Starting to see more and more hands come up. let me start to insert various theories along the way, otherwise we'll never get to them. And then we'll continue to take, like I said, this is not, what I think I have managed to figure out and can do is take you down the path of the conversation of what are these things and some of the classic answers. But it's not like I have a whole systematic analysis that leads to some grand conclusion. So let me start giving you theories. The first one I want to give is given by our greatest friend, our favorite commentator, a go-to commentator, Rashi, who brings the opinions of the Talmud. So these are, in a sense, the most authoritative opinions in the tradition. And we're going to see in them some of what we already spoke about, which is the light, the attempt to make sense of both of these words. So let's take a look at what Rashi says that they are. Okay, the Urim Vatumim. This was, and he sort of takes it as one unit. The Urim Vatumim, the whole thing was an inscription of Shem HaMeforash, which is a way of saying the divine name, the proper name of God. Is that Yud K Vav K, or is it some other explicit, like the 72-letter name of God that the mystics speak of? What was it? Some people say, oh, maybe Urim and Tumim are two names of God that were placed between. Rashi says that are placed between the folds. Hiflei Achoshen. So it seems that there's pieces, right? There's the back piece and there's the front piece, and this is parchment now. This is parchment that's placed in there, in the back of the breastplate, through which the breastplate made its statements clear. Literally, illuminate. She'al yadohu meir, illuminated. That's from Urim, illuminated. And this being allusion to the Urim, and meir dvarav umitamem et dvarav, and its promise is true. Now, true is a funny. Remember, Yale translated it this way too: light and truth. Now, the word tam, mitamem, from the root tamam, an allusion to tamim. That's right. The word tamim means pure, true, innocent, virtuous, right, complete, whole. Noah is described as tamim, Tzaddik tamim haya b'dorotav. He was a perfectly righteous, pure and righteous, however you translate that, but some kind of pure and whole thing. So the Talmud says these Urim Vatumim are the illuminating and the verifying. That's what they do. But the way it works. And I'm not sure why the Talmud makes this move. The way it works is they're not an object; they are some name of God that's sort of slipped into the breastplate, and then the breastplate. Well, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure exactly what happens. We'll think about that more. But the breastplate lights up. Was there a suggestion that it's being illuminated? That wasn't exactly explicit, but this is one theory, and I will just note that this theory is kind of like the beginning of what ends up continuing in Jewish tradition, this idea that the names of God have actual powers. The most famous expression of that notion is now the name, the moniker by which we refer to the founder of Hasidut, the Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name. And he was the one, but there were lots of like Baalei Shem Tov, or Baalei Shem, masters of divine names, who knew how to write divine names in such a way that it would safeguard or release divine properties of blessing, or maybe illuminate the breastplate, or tell you what you needed to know, or some kind of. Okay, all right. So that's first first pass here, okay, is that Rashi and the Talmud and many voices in the tradition say that the Urim Vatumim were a kind of code, almost like, we have these machines now where you like put the card in and the computer kind of plays based on like the code that's on the card, or think of a QR code, right? And it's like reads it and suddenly it's like whatever it does. I don't know, but that's one way we're beginning to speculate. All right, let's hear now what some folks are thinking. Matt Silverstein.
I have no answers. I have some other problems, or maybe, which is, we've got this long description. Does it relate to anything later? Like, does the priest later have this thing? Is that, why are we getting this as a food laws I can use, property laws I can use. Description of this, where do I go? Anyway,
Matt, I love learning with you, Matt. Matt asks exactly the right questions. That's exactly the right question. What's going on here? We're just discussing these in isolation. What do they do? And do we have any record of them doing anything? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And it's exactly the right question, because yes, we do. And that's the reason that we are even talking about them as objects of divination or prediction, is because it seems like that's what they're doing later. But when I say it seems like, I mean, it's not clear at all. Let me give you the first example. The first example is in the Torah itself, although we'll soon look at an example, an even more illuminating example in the book of Samuel, where they seem to be used again. The problem is we don't always get the full formulation in Urim Vatumim. So here's one of the objects, or one of the words in the book of Numbers, and it comes in the scene where Moses is appointing Joshua, by divine mandate, appointing Joshua to be his successor, okay? And suddenly there's mention of the Urim. Okay, so I'm going back a source because Matt actually asked the question so right that I probably should have done this earlier. I should have done this before, but this is the first instance of the Urim Vatumim use. So Moses spoke to the Eternal and said, "Let the Eternal source of the breath of all flesh appoint someone over the community who shall go out before them and come in before them, and who shall take them out and bring them in, so the congregation of the Eternal not be like sheep that have no shepherd." Okay, beautiful introduction to the idea of who will lead next, what Joshua will be. And the Eternal answered Moses, "Single out Joshua, son of Nun, a man with spirit in him, and lay your hand upon him, and have him stand before Eleazar and the priest and the whole community." Okay, Eleazar is the high priest now. Aaron has died. "And commission him in their sight, and invest him with some of your authority, so that the whole Israelite community may obey. But he shall present himself to Eleazar the priest, who shall on his behalf seek the judgment of the Urim." The judgment of the Urim, b'mishpat ha'urim. There it is in the Hebrew. Seek the judgment of the Urim before the Eternal. This is not even so clear how to translate this. "By such instruction shall they go out, and by such instruction shall they come in. Al piv yetzu v'al piv yevo." And it's not clear, is it by the instruction of, or the mouth of God, the priest, the Urim Vatumim? Not clear. And it's not the Urim Vatumim, it's just the Urim, but we do have that word judgment. "And he and all the Israelite militia and the whole community." So it kind of sounds like, I'm just going to give my version of it, but I'd love to hear yours. It kind of sounds like, okay, when I go and Aaron goes, you will be in the new Moses and Eleazar will be in the new high priest. And what will happen is, in times of decision making, in times of battle, in times of when you need to know what to do, you'll come to Eleazar and you'll ask your questions, and you consult the Urim. maybe you'll put the slip in, or maybe you'll just, hello Urim, I don't know, and then it'll tell you, maybe, if we were talking about the lights, right? Or no, maybe we're understanding all of this wrong, and somehow, I don't know. Speaking of which, maybe we're like thinking about all of this wrong. So first of all, we have an answer to Matt's question. We'll see it again and again, that there is a consulting of the Urim. There's a consulting of the Urim. What does that mean, to consult the Urim? And that it is associated with the priests, and it does render some kind of judgment. But we don't know exactly how it's happening. I want to give you another classic answer. I gave you Rashi's answer, and I don't even think we're going to get through all of the ones that I found, but I want to give you another classic answer that is Maimonides' answer, although Maimonides never says it. Maimonides never says it, but everybody assumes Maimonides believes it. It's like, if you can trust me on that one. I'm going to show you a commentary by the Tetzaveh HaKabbalah, great commentary by Rabbi Mecklenburg, Yaakov something Mecklenburg of 19th century Germany. And he's kind of working through this problem too. And he describes what is the common assumption that the Rambam, Maimonides, held, which is different from Rashi's. Remember, Rashi has these slips of paper, the Baal Shem Tov kind of style slips of paper. This is an explanation of another theory of what these things were. And it turns out what these things were not, according to the Rambam, according to other interpreters, what they were not separate things at all. Okay. In fact, well, just let's take a listen. This is Tetzaveh HaKabbalah, and he says, I was greatly puzzled over this, because I didn't find anything about it in the writings of Maimonides. Maimonides writes about all the garments on the high priest's clothing, in the high priest's outfit, but he never talks about the Urim V'Tumim. In the 9th chapter of his Laws of the Vessels in the Sanctuary, he describes all the details of the breastplate and the priestly robe, and he never mentions the Urim V'Tumim. But how could he leave out something explicitly mentioned in the Torah? That's just a question on the Rambam. Well, what he didn't think it was worth mentioning? The Torah mentions it. Therefore, it seems to me that he did not understand the Urim V'Tumim to be holy names of God, as the other commentators have claimed. Rather, the 12 stones that were inscribed with the names of the 12 tribes, they themselves are being referred to by the Torah as the Urim V'Tumim, because they would light up and verify matters of inquiry by signaling letters. Okay, so in some ways, it's not that different. It's like, this is supposed to be like the great rationalist is like, no, they weren't, divine names. It would just, the stones themselves would illuminate. It still seems like magic to me. But what is important about the Maimonides reading here is that it actually makes some sense of, well, both of these commentators, Rashi and at least this version of Maimonides, are just trying to make sense of the verses themselves. Because if we just go back to the original, Aaron shall carry the names of the sons of Israel on the breastplate of judgment over his heart, and then on the breastplate of judgment you shall place the Urim V'Tumim, which Maimonides just means like it's a repetition of, you place those stones, but they're illuminating stones, and they're always over Aaron's heart, and they light up. And that's why they're called Urim, and that would make sense of the verses in Numbers, but they're really just words for stones. Okay, that's Maimonides' opinion, and I offer it because I'm not sure it helps us that much, but it shows you that we really don't. Maimonides is like, what are we doing coming up with some newfangled thing here? It's just the stones themselves. That's the Urim V'Tumim, whereas Rashi's carrying on the tradition of the Talmud and most other interpreters that know. But that's less intuitive, that there were special divine names. Okay, so let me pause again and turn again to our murderer's row here, our line of as they call the batting order, our line of interpreters. So let's turn to Jen.
I'm actually kind of surprised that this didn't get like sort of sorted through before, but like when you look at that passage, there's many verses that say you shall do this, you shall do that, you shall do that. But once we get to this particular thing, it turns back to Aaron will do, Aaron will wear. It gets personal at that point. And you know, like Payam was making me think about like Aaron as a human being being involved in this, who has put these like, they put these like objective gems to like represent all the people. And then they come back and they talk about Aaron doing a thing, which makes me think that Aaron's personal relationships are somehow involved in this, or something about involved in your own personal relationship to the Israelites. So you have that objective on the outside and that personal on the inside, which is kind of a good balance and a good parallel. I have no idea how that ends up in like divination, like, like no idea. But it really does seem to me like the verse is indicating something personal at that point.
Yeah, especially right. I like that sensitivity, Jen, and especially that language alibo, on his heart, on his heart. He's going to carry it on his heart, which does seem, as you know, as someone said earlier, kind of symbolic and personal. You're adding, that's right. It's like he's carrying it, and you will go. It's like, let's just step back here for a second and think about, like I was going to say, you will go to the priest. That's part of the idea here is, and Jen's pointing out, there's all this finery and we're talking about all these things and the 12 stones, but in the end, the priest carries them, and you go and so will Joshua have to go to the high priest and consult the Urim V'Tumim. Now, so there's something about the high priest and the high priest who bears them. Now, let's just like insert an important parenthetical here, which is that there's a huge problem with the Urim V'Tumim and our whole conversation, and any kind of magic conversation in Jewish tradition, which is that it sounds a lot like other forms of divination that we would refer to as avodah zarah, as idolatry. Right? It's like divination. The Torah says not to practice divination, like, you know, throwing bones and seeing where they land, and, you know, fortune telling in these sorts of ways. But wait a minute, this is fortune telling, isn't it? And is this allowed? This is like a glaring problem. Like, we're trying to figure out what the Urim V'Tumim are, but we're also like, ooh, that's weird. So with all that, I want to insert that parenthetical, because that's a problem with the Urim V'Tumim. It's also in a sense a problem with the high priest. Like the whole system of sacrifices, it's all a little strange. And so we are to understand that this, and Noah was alluding to this earlier, this is really God talking. And the priest is a bearer of God's message. And the priest doesn't even do it himself. He does it through these stones, which is like, that's a little weird. But again, it's really God talking. And it's God's medium for communicating with you. And the priest will bear that upon his breast. But okay, but you still can sort of see there's something anxious here about this theologically for us. And at the same time, as the Tetzaveh HaKabbalah just said, it's in the Torah. It's in the Torah. There's nothing we can do about that. And it's in the Torah, and it's in the Torah twice. So there's all kinds of like, what's going on here? What's going on here? Let's see, do we have time for this? I'll give you one more example from the medieval commentators, one more example. And this should give you a sense of how uncomfortable this is. And again, I mean, to tell you, my research for this class was like dizzying. But again, I'm quoting someone not directly, but through someone else who's quoting him, because it's clearer when someone else says it. So we're going to take a look at the commentary of the Ibn Ezra. The Ibn Ezra is sort of second to Rashi as the most classic commentator. And his piece on this is very cool. And he says, I've got as usual, he says, like, I've got a secret and I really can't tell you the whole thing. I really can't. I can't. But I'll tell you just a little bit. he's such a tease. But the Ibn Ezra is quoted by Nachmanides, the Ramban. I've said a lot of names here, so if they're not so familiar to you, I'm just talking about various figures in the medieval world of Jewish medieval scholarship. But take a look here. This is one medieval scholar quoting an earlier one. at what the Ibn Ezra said these were. Let's see here, Urim V'Tumim. Okay, you should place in the breastplate of the judgment the Urim V'Tumim. Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra tried to give wisdom in the matter of the Urim V'Tumim by saying that they were made by a craftsman from gold and silver. And then he elaborates and claims that they were like the objects which the astrologers make in order to know the thoughts of the one who comes to ask them about the future. Velo amar klum. But what he said is worthless. Rather, the Urim V'Tumim are as Rashi has written. You gotta love these moments. Fighting words. Velo amar klum. It's literally, and he didn't. The Ibn Ezra said this, and literally and he didn't say anything. Velo amar klum. That's worthless. Nonsense. I want to just plug best book ever. We are about to release, I'm late in putting it together, as Vera knows, but we're about to release our second episode of this season. We released one, Vera, if you want to put it in the chat, on sibling rivalry. We're about to next week release one on astrology. So there's a little plug for, but the Ibn Ezra is the reason that we're doing this, because the Ibn Ezra was an astrologer. And so can you believe this? He's saying that the Urim V'Tumim was I don't even know what this is, but it's called an astrolabe. You know what an astrolabe is? It's like it's some kind of measurement tool that, all right, I'm going to call on Leah next, because she seems to know what it is. But this, you can just see in the language here, the debate, that the Rashi says one thing, and then Maimonides says doesn't really say it, but we think he said, no, you can't come up with a new paper writing technique. It's the stones themselves. And then the Ibn Ezra says, no, there was some astrological device in there. And Nachmanides comes along and says, that's heresy. I don't know, he didn't say heresy, but you can tell that he wants to, right? So that's where we're at. All right, Leah, what do you think?
I want to say two things. One thing is that Maimonides was virulently anti-astrology. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing I want to say is I think we're caught in a model of push phone, touch phone, and electric lights. Gems, I don't think on the breastplate were thick. I think they were thin and cut in a way so that Aaron, the priest, or Eliezer, who's ever wearing the breastplate, moves his trunk in the direction of sunlight and different variations of light in the way that perhaps stained glass was originally developed. And I think in that way, they're not the messengers of God, they're the receivers of God's message, and that was interpreted.
Oh, I love this interpretation. This is so incredible. This is to me, this is so compelling what Leah's given us. Is that, imagine that these stones were prisms which would reflect different light. Maybe they even had names scratched into them, as the Rambam imagines. And so they would, when they reflected light, maybe they would even project letters, maybe. But who knows? The idea it's so compelling. What Leah gives us is not just compelling because it's kind of makes sense. Like, oh, right, that's the way you would use stones to project light to give a message. But also, it kind of, there's something about it that works theologically, almost works a little better. That is to say, these stones they're objects, but they're going to project light. Light's from God. Light, and we're just going to let the light come through and see what God says. Now, is this divination idolatrous practice? I don't know. Like, does it make us uncomfortable? But this one's sanctioned by the Torah, and you can see the beauty of it. As I really, really love that description, Leah. That there's like, maybe there was you come to the priest, you ask your question, the priest uses these stones to create. And then you see, what does God say on the ceiling or whatever it is? That's, in this mysterious search, that's a better a guess than any one that I gave. Okay. One more comment and then one more text, and then we'll see where we're at. And I want to turn to Alexandra.
Thank you. I love that image, Leah, of the the stained glass window. I was wondering, since there is no real physical description of the Urim and Tumim, maybe they weren't physical at all, and maybe it's just an angelic or angel energy or something like that. There is other areas in Judaism where we do bring the angels to us and surround us, in the B'Shem prayer in the Shema, where you surround yourself with the guardian angels and you put the light of God over your head. And so how much more so would the priest bring the angels or in some sort of angelic or divine energy in and consciously put it here like an embodied energetic kinesthetic spiritual practice that this energy, these angels are here, and we physically can bring non-physical energy to us and let it guide us.
There's a couple of things that your description is kind of picking up on that leads the tradition in various ways. In some ways, I think your comments are, though obviously, angels are quite different than anything we've seen before, but in some ways they're similar to Rashi's comments, because they're I think that's what the Talmud is also trying to do, is say, it's though in the end they come to a written name, which is physical in one way. I think what they're trying to express is that it's a spiritual property, an emanation, and that God's name, the various names of God in Kabbalistic literature often are kind of like angels or emissaries or expressions of God. And the other thing I want to say about your wondering here, are these beings or angels or entities or energies, is that a lot of the commentators note that the appearance is not just the first appearance of the Urim and Tumim. It's not Urim and Tumim, it's the Urim, and literally, actually, it repeats it again, the Tumim. So look at this, Ha-Urim v'ha-Tumim, the lights and the perfections. And that almost sounds like the lights and the perfections, the divine being, the spirits, right? There's something in there. Yeah, something really interesting to wonder about there. All right, let me just take us on one last turn here, and this one's a doozy, okay? And Matt's gonna like this because it's heretical in one way, which is that and speaking of heresy, I got a lot of these sources, and I want to credit it, although he doesn't credit himself. This is kind of fascinating. I got a lot of this from a vaguely heretical, but very good Torah website called thetorah.com. And this is amazing. It's a collection of articles that Matt would love that analyzes the Torah mostly through the lens of critical biblical scholarship. And this article is by a guy named Yoel, who is apparently a Satmar Chassid, and is not giving his full name, but is a Satmar Chassid who's interested in biblical criticism. He's and can't reveal who he really is. It's just kind of a wild. I grew up with the Satmars, and it's kind of a wild thought. It's one of my landsmen here. But anyway, he kind of takes us through this, and he presents the last opinion, and he presents it as a kind of, potentially heretical or critical scholarly opinion. And that is because it borrows from the Septuagint. Okay. So the Septuagint is, simply put, the Greek translation of the Torah, but the one that was thought to be commissioned by Ptolemy, King Ptolemy, in the 3rd century before the Common Era. Okay, so, and it was considered to be pretty authoritative, the first major translation of the Torah. So take a look here. Here's what, sorry, I have the wrong verse called up. Okay, here's the critical verse, okay? This is we have 10 minutes left, and we're going to try and do one last important move. And here's a critical verse about the Urim V'Tumim. We saw one in the book of Numbers. Remember, Matt asked earlier, well, where is it? Is it ever used? And the verse is like this. They've gone to battle, but God is angry because someone has God never likes it when you go to war and then profit off of the war. Right? So they've gone to battle. Saul has gone to battle, and God is upset because someone has profited off the war. And it's Jonathan, it's Yonatan, his son, who couldn't help himself and took some honey that he found. He was just hungry, but God doesn't like that. And Saul is outraged and flying off the handle and doing what sometimes reckless kings do in the Bible, which is to say, I'll kill my own son if he did it, and that's what he threatens to do. But to do that, he seems to once again, to figure out who did it, he seems to consult, well, not the Urim V'Tumim and not the Urim, but maybe the Tumim. Okay, so let's take a look here. There's a little clue in here, and this is the book of Samuel. For as the Eternal lives, who brought victory to Israel, even if it was through my son Jonathan, he shall be put to death. The person who is caught having taken something. Not one soldier answered him. And he said to all the Israelites, you stand on one side and my son Jonathan and I shall stand on the other. It's all like a setup for him to end up cursing and killing his own son, which another figure in Tanakh does. Eventually he gets out of it. But the troops say to Saul, do as you please, because they didn't take it. And then Saul then said to the Eternal, the God of Israel, show Tamim. Show Tamim. And Yonatan and Saul were indicated by lot, and the troops were cleared. So wait, what were the Tamim? It's not even Tumim, by the way. It's like, this is how vague this conversation is. It's not Tumim, but Tamim, but it sounds kind of like it's written the same way. And then you notice this little note here, this little note. And this note, if you clicked in it, brings you to this note. Meaning of Hebrew uncertain. Septuagint reads, okay, so we just saw Saul said to the Eternal of the God of Israel, show Tamim, and it's sort of abrupt. What does that even mean? In the Septuagint, the translation, the Greek translation of the Torah reads, why have you not responded to your servant today? If this iniquity was due to my son Jonathan or to me, O Lord God of Israel, show Urim, and if you say it was due to your people Israel, show Tumim. In other words, this is the Greek translation inserts an extra piece, and the truth is the verse in our Tanakh doesn't make a lot of sense. It makes more sense here, and so the idea is maybe the Septuagint is telling us what the way the Urim and Tumim worked, which is, and this gets back to what Richard said at the beginning, is that it could answer yes or no questions, or this one or that one questions. Okay. If it's us, throw Urim, and if it's us, throw Tumim. It's a little bit like dice. Right? A little bit like dice. So that's the Septuagint. Now, I don't know. What do we make of the Septuagint? Now, why is this heretical? Well, Septuagint is sort of a funny source for explaining the Torah, and especially because the Septuagint, in being different from the Torah, seems to indicate, this is not the Torah, but later books of the Bible, seems to indicate that we have the wrong version, and that's like heresy. But also, it just makes so much more sense here. It's the first description we've had. Urim one way, Tumim the other. And none of the commentators have assumed that. But this reading of the Septuagint might suggest that. And I think this article goes like that in the Torah.com. Okay, for your consideration. But I want to say one last thing, and that is this. I don't really feel uncomfortable talking about the Septuagint. Matt and I are always kind of like happily sparring because I'm a traditionalist and I don't really usually go down the line of critical scholarship, piecing out what is the real text that we have. I don't feel uncomfortable though with the Septuagint because the Septuagint by legend, by both Greek and Jewish legend, was commissioned by Ptolemy to be written by 72 rabbis, 72 Jewish scholars. Now, let me give you the version of that story. There's a letter, a Greek letter that accounts this. accounts that gives this account. And there's also a passage in the Talmud. Let me give you the passage in the Talmud just as one last, what is the Septuagint and why would it be inserting new information into the Torah? This is our account in the Talmud, and we'll close with this. The Gemara continues, and this was due to the incident of King Ptolemy, as it is taught in the Braita. There was an incident involving King Ptolemy of Egypt, who assembled 72 elders from the sages of Israel and put them into 72 separate rooms. Okay, this is the Jewish version, and did not reveal to them for what purpose he had assembled them, so that they would not coordinate their responses. He entered and approached each and every one and said to them, "Write for me a translation of the Torah of Moses, your teacher." The Holy One, blessed be he, I didn't retranslate this, sorry, placed wisdom in the heart of each and every one, and they all agreed to one common understanding. Not only did they all translate the text correctly, they all introduced the same changes into the translated text. Okay. And then the Talmud goes on and gives a bunch of lists of where they all, when they translated it into Greek, they all made the same changes. And all of the examples are things that if you, like when God says, let us make the human being, who's the us? They changed that. When anytime you would get confused and think there was heresy in the Torah, they changed it to make it seem clearer. Okay, so that's just the theory that we have about the Septuagint. But if that's true, let's take both the like scholarly and the rabbinic perspectives and put them together. I don't know how many of you were convinced by that kind of dice rolling image, the yes or no, or just convinced that the Septuagint has the right version of the text. But if that's true, then the strangest thing of all would be that the rabbis of old had the original text and felt that the original text would be too problematic. And so they actually gave the explanation of how this worked so that, in a sense, the secret would be more available in translation than it would be in the original. Now, I don't know what that means. Does it mean they misled? Does it mean they made sense of, though this wasn't really the way it worked? Or does it mean that they actually revealed the secret when they did the translation? I don't know. I don't know exactly what to do with that, and we are out of time. But that's one of the prevailing theories now of the Urim V'Tumim, is that this verse tells you that they would cast lots one way or another, and Urim this way, Tumim that way, and maybe they were stones that like were black and white. Some people, like, it really does start to sound like dice. We've seen a lot of different theories here along the way, but I really do think nobody's got it. I don't know about you. I wish I had more time to ask, but it really does feel to me like I'm not totally convinced by any of this, and I don't think I've gotten to the bottom of it. But hey, maybe next year, right? I'll see you all next week. Have a great Shabbos.
Thanks, great class. See you in class tonight.
Oh yes, I'm giving a
Yeah,
class
that's
tonight. If you're interested, it's called Living in Jewish Time, and it's a class on basic Jewish practices, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, lifely Jewish practices. So tonight at 6 o'clock, also on Zoom in our calendar. Thanks for